Henry and Michael, thank you very much for inviting me here. This is really the last talk I would like to give, to be quite honest, because it is confusing. And when I think about the Titanic, I think about Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet and what they were doing in the bottom of the ship. So it's really the context of what you're in fact looking at. But I'm standing here on the shoulders of people like Brian French and Borgen Nordestgaard, and you know, it is a very confusing situation. So there is a lot of biology out there, especially in animals, that suggests a strong relationship between ApoA1 and protection against coronary disease, and also loss of ApoA1 and increased coronary disease. All of that is clouded by some of my personal experience. And for example, just to give you an example, we had a patient referred when I was a lot younger. This man was 32 years of age. They had to resuscitate him in a park. He was thin, not diabetic, not hypertensive. And they did, and they were able to resuscitate this 32-year-old man. He got to our ER at the Academic Medical Center in Amsterdam. They did a coronary angiogram, and he had really extensive coronary disease. And it was so much that they couldn't do PCI. They had to do coronary artery bypass grafting. And in those days, in young people, they took the mammary artery. And so the surgeon opened the chest, and the mammary artery was so atherosclerotic that they couldn't use the mammary artery, which was a first ever in someone around 30. And so they had to go to the saphenous vein and do it. And then they did, like 2 weeks later, a lipid profile on this individual, and he had, as a sole abnormality, no HDL cholesterol. And then we did a whole workup, and he proved to be a 10-year disease patient. So he had a double mutation in ABCA1, he had 0 HDL, a little elevated TRIGs, very normal low LDL. He was not insulin resistant, not hypertensive, and he had never smoked. And in his family, there was no heart disease. This is a recessive disease. And so that really colored my view on HDL as an important factor for early coronary disease. And then, unfortunately, and I think I can go to the next slide, came all the Mendelian randomization studies. And I think the Mendelian randomization studies, with the exception of the CTP gene, which we now understand is not only an HDL gene but also an LDL gene, basically made it very unlikely that HDL or ApoA1 played a causal role in the pathogenesis of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And that really, you know, makes it very difficult. And I then moved from the clinic and the genetics to the trials, because I thought if I can prove with clinical trials that raise HDL, that there is less heart disease, then that would be kind of the final argument to kind of fight back against these genetic people that kind of are stealing my particle, and show that this is something that is worthwhile looking at. So what at that time was in development? CTP inhibitors, there was the ER niacin, leropoprand combination, a lot of ApoA1 based strategies, there's an LCAT replacement strategy, there are ABCA1 agonists through microRNA 33, and there are some oral LCAT agonists. All of these drugs, and these are, with the exception of some ApoA1 based strategies, oral drugs that raise HDL cholesterol through some mechanism, and I can say here that this has been invariably a failure. So there is no example of an oral drug that can raise HDL and or ApoA1 that has shown any benefit in the clinic. The story of CTP inhibition, I think, is unraveled by Dr. Brian French, and I'm not going to steal his glory. We are working on a paper to show exactly, he already alluded a little bit to this disjunct between LDL and ApoB, but I think it's much nicer to read that in print at a later stage. But definitely what Dr. French showed is that the HDL increase conferred by CTP inhibition is worthless. It doesn't help at all, and it definitely does not add to anything that these drugs might confer. Well, we've seen the ER niacin leropoprand combination failure with the HBS2 Thrive. And I think that, and I'm a little bit here using the European view, nobody uses niacin anymore in Europe because of its side effects, and it's never been a very popular drug. And now with the large outcome trial being negative, I think we can kind of put that drug in the can as well. So then we have a number of ApoA1 based strategies, and this was basically an escape from the oral drug. So you can say that if an oral drug through some sort of influence on the receptor or an enzyme raises HDL, that doesn't work. I think that the vast majority, or maybe all of our colleagues, believe that now. So then the next step that you could try to do is in fact take an HDL particle and infuse it in a human being and see whether that would help. There is such a particle from Serenis called Serenis 001. Then there's an oral drug from Resvologics, but that drug is now actually discovered. It does increase ApoA1 with about 10%, but in fact it's a BET protein inhibitor. So this is a very intriguing drug that has to do with epigenetics and methylation, and it's now going in a very different direction that I'll share with you later. ApoA1 Milano is this bizarre kind of particle from the medicines company, previously from Asperion and Pfizer. Then CSL Behring has CSL112, and then there's a machine that generates pre-beta HDL. All of this is based on the fact that reverse cholesterol transport that involves, and can you see my arrow? No, you can't. But what it postulates is that if you infuse a small pre-beta HDL particle, that particle is so small that it's capable of slipping in between two endothelial cells into the coronary, have an interaction with a macrophage, where this protein called ABCA1 transfers free cholesterol onto the baby HDL particle, and then LCAT esterifies that cholesterol. The cholesterol particle swells up into a spherical particle, gets into the lymph transports it back into the circulation, then that mature HDL particle goes to SRB1 in the liver, where the cholesterol esters are then taken up into the liver, used for bile production, and that goes into the toilet. So that's true reverse cholesterol transport, and this is true, this happens. We have never proven it in humans, but it is proven in animals. And of course there are multiple points at which you can do a trial. You can add LCAT to the system. And I know that there is recombinant LCAT and that's tried now in current trials. You can add HDL particles to this system. You can try to promote ABCA1. You can kick ABCA1 in the gut and see whether it does more. And so all of that is tried, but I have to be very honest, none of it actually has worked. So what do we have what do we have in terms of, and here I'm really confused, what do we have in terms of biological evidence that this would work in human beings? Well, the best we have is this test of HDL efflux capacity. So what you do here is you take serum from a human and you test it and see whether it is able to efflux cholesterol, to get cholesterol out of a macrophage, basically. This is pioneered by George Rothblatt and now commercialized by Dan Rader. And in fact, this cholesterol efflux capacity is inversely associated with prevalent and incident atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. The first trial was a New England trial by Kara, where it was shown that in fact, and this is with carotid intima media thickness, and then later with real incident events in the Dallas Heart Study. And then I thought, let's do it again in EPIC Norfolk. And in fact, we also found, and as you can see here on the right hand, is that the higher the efflux, the lower the risk for coronary disease. And this is not as EPIC Norfolk is 27,000 people prospectively followed up for about 9 years. So I find it still very hard to marry those data to the fact that HDL or the efflux capacity of HDL in your serum wouldn't be an important biological parameter. The problem is, of course, is that you now have to prove that increasing this parameter would lead to less events. And that is always the last final proof of the pudding is in the eating, and that is something that is still absolutely not proven. So where are we with these HDL infusibles? Well, Professor Nichols will show you today that Serenus 001 has failed. So the CARROT study is an IVUS study with an HDL infusion 10 times after an ACS, and unfortunately there's absolutely no effect of this particle on any parameter in the arterial wall. Failed. RVX 208 produces an increase in ApoA1 of about 10% and an HDL increase of 8%, but this drug, when further discovered, in fact, proved to be a BET protein inhibitor and is now being tested in an outcome trial called BET on MACE. This is a large secondary prevention outcome trial in type 2 diabetics. And so here we don't have an answer, but this drug is doing so many other things in terms of methylation and epigenetics that you can't use it as an argument that raising ApoA1 or HDL would work. So basically we have to discard this trial for that. ApoA1 Milano. ApoA1 Milano was made on an epidemiological observation that a small village in the north of Italy had a variant in ApoA1, and these people seem to live long. Now, I think if you go back to the original epidemiological observations, you can put a lot of question marks here, because the comparator for that long life were factory workers from a nearby city. And so you could theorize that the initial observation for A1 Milano was simply wrong, that these people were living in a village where the air was clean and they were eating olive oil and they didn't smoke and they were simply very healthy, and that was the reason that they lived long. But this particle was initially in the newspapers, Drano for the heart. Cholesterol study offers hope for a bold therapy. If you read the articles from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, it looked like, you know, the next kind of stuff that made you live till about 100. Well, we now know, and also then there was a study, an IVUS study by the Cleveland Clinic that showed on the right-hand side massive regression, actually double or triple the regression of rosuvastatin 40 for a period over 24 months. Now we've had some very good statistical people look at that initial study, and the A1 Milano study that is now just out there and is also failed. So the new A1 Milano study is actually, that was done by the medicines company, zero effect, and actually both trials are so small that both could have been due to a play of chance. But of course, no one's going to develop A1 Milano anymore. And so we are now left with this bizarre legacy where the initial observation might have been a fluke. The first trial was very positive, but it was so small, it could have been a play of chance. And the second trial is negative. It could also be a play of chance because it was too small. But unfortunately, those data can never be used anymore. So what is left? The only thing that's left right now, and I see Borge already laughing a little bit, but you have to admire my persistence. The last thing that is left is CSL 112. So CSL Behring is a company that was made big by using products from blood transfusion. And you know, one product in a bag that is just taken from you is an HDL particle. You can take HDL out of a blood transfusion bag. And that's exactly what they've done, and then they've kind of reconstituted a little bit. And so they have made a particle that's called CSL 112, and that is really, really close to a human pre-beta HDL particle. And I can tell you that they have now decided to formally test this particle in an ACS outcome trial of 7,400 individuals to start in early 2018. So this is really the last straw we have to prove that infusion of an HDL particle is going to deliver any benefit in the future. And this trial is called EGIS-2. Then you might say, but what about the machine? Well, you know, there is this very interesting Delipidation machine So what happens in this machine, and here is that you take blood from someone, delipidate the HDL, and then give an autologous retransfusion of that HDL back. And it also makes your mother-in-law look like your girlfriend, which is a fantastic side effect of that therapy. But you know, to be frank, the alpha HDL is turned completely into pre-beta 1 HDL. So this machine has good biology, it does everything it does, and in fact it has a little IVUS trial that showed that it can regress total atheroma volume. But it's going to be difficult to find the finances and the organization to do that, but I really hope that this is also something that we can test, but it's only a small straw. The real big beam that we still have is CSL Behring and the Aegis 2 trial. So I think that I have to be a little bit depressed almost. The moment of truth, I think, has arrived. It has already arrived for oral drugs. There are no oral drugs that raise HDL that have yielded any benefit. So the moment of truth has arrived now for HDL infusion. CARROT is finished, and so only Aegis 2 and HALO is the IVUS trial with the machine, are all poised and in fact are all meant to run in 2018. These therapies all promote cholesterol efflux, and cholesterol efflux in really good studies predicts incident CV events. So I still have some hope that infusion of HDL might in the end confer some benefit, but that might be my optimistic nature. Thank you very much.